Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tim Chandler, and I am representing the Power Plant Contemporary Art Gallery, where I'm currently the TD Curator of Education Fellow. This is the Power Plant's 11th year working with Art Toronto, and we are once again pleased to present you with our Power Talk series at the fair this year. I hope that everyone had a chance to attend the engaging and insightful talk provided yesterday by Charles Gaines about his Manifesto series. I really enjoyed it. But before we begin, I'd like to thank Susanna Rosenstock and the whole Art Toronto team for all of their help in putting together Power Talks this year, as well as I'd like to thank the Solotech guys back there as well, as they're kind of like the unsung heroes of this weekend and really help make sure everything goes smoothly. So for those of you who don't know, the Power Plant is located at Harbourfront Centre, and we focus on presenting the best in contemporary art from Canadian and international artists. We've just opened our fall 2017 exhibitions at the end of September this year, featuring work by Amalia Pica and Semi Balogi, as well as a site-specific commission by Michael Landy, which will be on show until May 2018. As always, admission to the gallery is free, so we encourage you to come and see these wonderful shows, as we will be open all of this weekend. And we're also just a short walk away from the fair, so it's more than easy to get there if you're already at the fair. I would also be remiss not to mention that the Power Plant is participating in Edition downstairs. So we are offering a variety of publications and limited edition artworks, all with a bunch of special prices for Art Toronto attendees. So please go down and check out Edition as well. But of course, the reason I'm up here right now is because today we are presenting our second Power Talk of the weekend with Mary Spirito and her talk entitled Proto Cinema in and around Istanbul. Mary Spirito is Founding Director of Proto Cinema, a transnational experiment in realizing site-aware exhibitions around the world, which is based in Istanbul and New York. Since 2014, Spirito is Curator of Conversations for Art Basel and Art Basel Miami Beach, was Curator of Alt Art Space in Istanbul from 2015 to 2017, and was advisor to the second Mardin Biennale in Turkey in 2012. Spirito will discuss the founding and development of Proto Cinema, present a few of their projects, talk about working with uncertainty and the new role of nonprofits worldwide. So please join me in welcoming Mary Spirito to the stage.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I would also like to say thank you to Art Toronto and to the Power Plant for inviting me. This is an honor and it's so exciting. The Power Plant invited me to talk about Proto Cinema. And before I sort of launch into what Proto Cinema is and break it down, I wanted to just say that I've seen with my own eyes the importance of art, that art is one of many ways of opening up understanding between individuals, and that where there's understanding, there's a possibility for empathy, and that in the world, only good things come from empathy. And so this is where the motivation for Proto Cinema comes from, okay? Founded in 2011, Proto Cinema is a mission-driven art organization that realizes site-aware exhibitions in the world. So, 2011, I started it. Proto Cinema, the name Proto Cinema, is a little misleading, I understand. It sounds like it's a film organization, and while I do show a lot of film and video, because it's a sort of vernacular of our time, Proto Cinema is in fact an art organization. The name came from Werner Herzog, a film called The Cave of Forgotten Dreams, in which he's talking about the oldest drawings known to man, the cave drawings in France, in which there are beasts drawn with 8 legs. And Werner asks, why do these beasts have 8 legs? And he answers his own question, and he says, perhaps this is man's first attempt to represent motion. Perhaps this is Proto Cinema. So in this way, I'm able to embody motion. Proto Cinema is in motion. We always make our exhibitions in different places. We never use the same site more than once. I wanted motion to be embodied in what we do, but not to be like directly like sort of underneath and inside of it. Also, by talking about proto cinema in the way that Herzog was referencing an attempt to represent motion, there's an idea that's in someone's head, there's the representation of that idea, there's another person looking at the representation, and then it goes into their head and they have another understanding. So there's like a journey of translation and passing of information. So perception and these things are very much embodied also as much as motion and being site-specific. Proto Cinema is not, I end up talking a lot about new models, but it's not really a new model. There are organizations that have been around for a long time that are conscious of context and site, like, for example, Art Angel in London, which is 25 years old, Creative Time, which in New York, which is over 40 years old, and other small organizations around the world like this. So how do we do this? How do we create understanding and empathy? For me, it always starts with the artists and with the artwork. So with that, I'm going to talk about 4 different projects I've selected because they're different from each other. One is an American in Turkey, another one is a French artist with a show in Turkey. Of course, I'm going to tell you a show of a Turkish artist in New York, and then Turkish artist in Paris, and then an Albanian in Turkey. So we'll kind of move through this. But let me see how to... Oh, yeah. All right. I'm starting with Trevor Paglin's exhibition in Istanbul because it's very special for me in the power plant, because that's when a group from the power plant came to Istanbul, and we had a very meaningful interaction, the power plant group and Proto Cinema together in this space. This is the place. This is a garage in Dolapdere, a very sort of normal neighborhood, down the hill from sort of Istiklal and Galatasaray, and the places that people normally go to when they visit Istanbul. Trevor has been working on this piece for a long time, and this is in the very early, the genesis of it. So when you go into this garage on the first floor, you walk in, and there was just like a dumpy old garage with some stuff in it. And then you found towards the end of that first floor this film on a kind of crappy TV. It's a NASA footage from 1964 where they were doing tests for a temporary satellite, which would go on the side of another rocket, all folded up. When it got into outer space, it would be separated from that rocket. It would expand, and it's silver. It's kind of made out of this really thin silver material, and it would reflect the light of the sun, and you could see it from Earth. And Trevor was really interested in making an artwork about satellites where they would do the opposite of what satellites do. Satellites send and receive large amounts of information. Satellites cannot be seen from Earth with a normal human eye. And satellites, they stay in the atmosphere forever. After they serve their purpose for the cell phone companies or whatever purpose they're serving, they get launched into another sphere outside of that. And because of the atmosphere, they don't decompose. It's a permanent junkyard that's constantly growing, and it's not going to decompose. They'll last longer than human beings will last. So when you go up the stairs here, you go inside this tiny little garage, and you found this big sculpture. And this is a non-functioning satellite. This satellite this is a prototype for a larger project that is going to be going into orbit November of 2018 with the Nevada University. This is sort of like a trajectory of supporting artists through realizations on many different levels, and ours is on a small level, but this is actually going to go into orbit where it looks very different from this, but it will go up there. It'll be able to be seen from human beings on Earth by reflecting the sunlight. It's temporary. When it gets pulled down towards the atmosphere, it will burn up and be dissolved, and it doesn't send or receive any information. We did this show in Istanbul 2 months after the Gezi Park uprisings in 2013, and this was a time where access to information was extremely important, and so we didn't plan it, but it was sort of a being conscious of site and context that it had a lot of meaning for us at the time. This is a project by Dominique Gonzalez Forrester called Dinner Noir. And this one also, we didn't plan it. We planned the show as like a year, 8 months out. And she had done a previous project in Istanbul where we had a party. And Dominique Gonzalez-Forster is one of the artists from the Relational Aesthetics, like the early 90s group with Philippe Perino, Pierre Huyghe, and others, where the event and the exchange of socializing is an important part of the artwork. And Dominique also uses materials such as waiting, longing, and anticipation. These are sort of like palpable materials for her artwork. And this event took place on the eve of the parliamentary elections, the first set of elections after Gezi Park uprise. For months beforehand, people were waiting. They were waiting to see what happens. Businesses were waiting to make decisions to see how things are going to go at the elections. Because of people were meeting each other and building new relationship during the Gezi Park times, they've developed networks of communication and relationships that weren't there before. There was a lot of people poll watching. People left this event to go home early so they could get up early and go to the polls to make sure that people weren't intimidated at the polls, that the votes actually got counted, that people who were registered were able to like recognize their registration and be able to vote. So this night was kind of a very tense and suspenseful night. And this dinner noir, she selected 25 different books that were about darkness, about different interpretations of darkness, like Orhan Pamuk's Black Book was a sort of like more simple end, but then the story of O. And she invited, she asked me at one point, she said, there's a dominatrix mistress. Her name is Catherine Robbe-Gurrier. And we've been talking with her and getting some counsel on how to make this a very special ceremony. And Catherine Robbe-Gurrier is the widow of Alain Robbe-Gurrier, so the filmmaker and author who also like wrote a lot. They were sort of a famous S&M couple in Paris. Of course, when I invited her, she was 83 years old, but she said, would you invite her? And I said, sure, okay, sure. So, she came and we had an event that was people were invited to wear black and come, and they didn't know what they were going to get. And of course, there was all these ideas of like, this dominatrix from Paris is coming and what's going to happen to us. And then some people were inside at the actual dinner, and some people were outside in the bar. And people who were in the bar were like a little aggravated they couldn't get into the dinner. And people in the dinner were hearing that there was a party going on at the bar. So there's all this, like, I guess now we call it FOMO, this sort of not knowing and wishing that you knew something else that you don't know. And of course, it was PG event. But let me just kind of run through, because these images are quite beautiful. The books. That's Catherine Robbe-Gurrier. It's a moment during the dinner. The other thing that's interesting is Catherine lived in Üsküdar in Istanbul, and she actually, she met Alain there. Yes, we had a mannequin and a real lady laying on the table. And so for her, Istanbul was full of, they made a film about the architecture in Istanbul that was made completely from a boat going up and down the Bosphorus. And so she has a very nice personal relationship with Istanbul, so it had a lot of meaning for her, reflecting her past as well. This is a work by Hale Tenger, a Turkish artist who we decided to show in New York City. We found a site in a basement of a huge old building that is former Bell Telephone building. In this place, they invented long-distance phone calls, and it was the first time they put sound to film. So communication is also a very big part of the history of this site. When we did the show, it was 4 blocks from the new Whitney Museum of American Art, so it was in an interesting context in relation to American art. But this piece, I want to make sure I get the title right. We didn't go outside, we were always on the outside. We didn't go inside, we were always on the inside. She made it first for the 1995 Istanbul Biennial, where she was invited to go to Entrepot, the warehouse where the biennial was housed, and she found this guardhouse there. And this guardhouse is very special and unusual because inside, the guard, this is the way she found it. The guard had found images from magazines, newspapers, calendars, beautiful images of nature from all over the world, and it hung them up inside the guardhouse, from which he was supposed to be, watching the territory or the property he was on and guarding it. But he created a beautiful interior space made of representations of nature. And then also you see there's a little radio here. 1994 was when the Turkish government finally released TV and radio from being in control of the government. Then it went public in 1994. So for her to have the radio here is a big signifier about how people get information. So you can imagine if you can't get information from the radio, the TV, the newspaper, you get it from talking to each other and how important it is to talk. And traveling during these years are very difficult. So you would walk, when you checked out this artwork, you'd walk into this sort of like dark space, and you walk around the barbed wire fence and then into the building and where music was playing. And I have a nice film of walking through this. Hang on. There's no audio on this, but the music that's playing on the little radio is sort of traditional Turkish folk music. The other thing that was sort of interesting is when I was in New York and I was trying to find people that would install a barbed wire fence, we got lots of quotes from different people around the city and outside the city, and the best deal came from some Turks. And this is the experience that Hale was trying to express of being in Turkey, where it's not part of the Arab world, it's not part of the Persian world, it's not part of Europe, it's its own sort of suspended liminal space, where for some time period it was hard to go in and out, so there was like a kind of, it's beautiful on the inside, it's lovely there, but it's not easy to pass back and forth. I'm going to jump over this, but if we have time, I'll come back. Proto Cinema did an Emerging Curator series in 2015 and 2016. But I also want to show you, we took a young artist from Istanbul named Lara Ogal to Paris, and we found a little storefront near Republik, and she brought this window, which is a house from her grandmother's house in Izmir, and she had been in Istanbul, walking around the city and finding lots of these structures that are on the sidewalk in both Paris and Istanbul, that in Turkey we call them babas. And they're the things that keep the traffic, keep cars from parking on the sidewalk or keep people on the sidewalk from sort of walking on the street. They sort of control your movement. And she thought it was sort of interesting that they're called babas, because that's a Turkish word for father. And also in Turkey, the founding Prime Minister or President Ataturk is also referred to as father. So she was experiencing some feelings of the failure of patriarchy. And also, we didn't plan this, but this exhibition was on the same day as the American presidential elections in 2016. So I think we're all having a sort of a deeper reflection on the failure of patriarchy right now. But I also have a video walkthrough of this where the videos are films of sort of this feeling two-sided of matriarchy, the part where it's solid and nurturing and supportive, and the part where it's also a containing, controlling experience. So can we play this one? To sort of walk through the exhibition to give you a feeling like as if you were there and you were walking through, this is what you would experience. The wallpaper of the sky actually came from an old house in Paris. And the babas are both French babas, and the tall, skinny ones are the French ones, and the short, fat ones are the Turkish ones. And she cast them in the cement bases, and they were so perfect in the shape of the bucket that she hammered them in these fragments of cement. So when you walk in the back room into the video installation, you're kind of walking on this crunching, fragile, uncertain flooring. One of the things I was thinking about talking today was uncertainty, where people talk a lot about, like, you know, what are you going to do? How is it? What are your plans? And things like this. And I think that in a way, like supporting artists, you never know what they're going to do, but you believe in them and you're happy to support them. And the journey of being interested in art, and if I knew what I was doing, there would be no, like the whole quote about research, if I knew what I was doing researching, I wouldn't have to research it. Like the journey of going places sort of emotionally or experientially that I don't know what's going to happen, for me is super interesting, and I want to know what I don't know. So working in conditions that are very uncertain, like I can't say what's going to happen anywhere in the future, but becoming okay with that and just going day to day and taking it as it is it's part of a practice, and it makes it actually kind of more exciting. So part of that is in here as well. I don't know when I invite an artist to do a show next year what space we're going to get, if we're going to be able to find a space, what city it's going to be in, and people are like, oh my God, that must be terrible. And I'm like, no, it's great. The last artist I want to talk to you guys about is Adrian Paci. Adrian's Albanian, and he and I've been talking for a long time, and he had a piece that he'd been thinking about for 10 years. He had to leave Albania because he lived during a time of a dictator, and he moved to Italy and lived most of his life there. He made this new work called Interrogam, which is the space between two different leaders, like if a president steps down before a new president is sort of announced or confirmed. And this is a film that's made up of broadcast footage, all found footage of like 5 or 6 different dictators, the funerals of these dictators. No dictators are in it. It's just the people who are coming to mourn. And the mourning is, it's done in public, it's obligatory. It's not, no one's forcing anyone to do it, but they know that they have to do it. And the film moves from very personal sort of close-ups of people crying from different races, different ages, different time periods, and then it gets bigger and bigger where you see people lining up to say goodbye, and the masses just grow and grow beyond conception. And I just showed this work in Istanbul this past month. We opened it in September, and I de-installed it before I came here. And Adrian really wanted to show it in Istanbul at this time. And we found an old bakery, like an old sort of factory to show it in that was very intimate. You go down sort of a busy road, turn into a little mews, go into a courtyard, and it was up inside this building. So it was sort of a private experience. But really very much about the theater of obligatory public grieving. So it affected the people who live there in one way and the people who don't live there in another way. But for me, it was a profound experience, and the context was a really important part of it. Do you guys have any questions? I don't have any more pictures. We have to finish now. All right, so I'll go back. I'll tell you about the Emerging Curator series. Because for Proto Cinema, it's maybe between 2 and 4 shows a year, and they're in different places. So I don't have like a regular team. Like I don't have a staff that's like full time, like Tim, to do lots of stuff. So every time I do a show in that city, I sort of build like Ocean's 11 style. I build the A team, and we get like someone to look for spaces, someone to help with fabrication, installation, press, communications, event, or whatever, all this stuff. And so because of that, I hire people that have other jobs or are sort of available partly. So I got to meet lots of the young people working in Istanbul that are, doing other things. And a lot of them wanted to do other stuff also. And so like some of the other stuff would be making exhibitions. So I made a selection of about 7 different young curators, and we made this series where the process was that they would work on a proposal with me, and we have a space that we collaborated with called 5533, which is the longest standing artist-run space in Istanbul. It's been open for 10 years. And we work on the proposal together, and usually includes young artists from the area because, that's who they know, and that's within the budget. And then we gave those proposals to mentor curators at different institutions in and out of Istanbul. So November Painter, who was at SALT but is now in Toronto, was one of the mentor curators. Anne Elgood from the Hammer, Jasmine Raymond from MoMA, Francois Quintin from Lafayette Fondazione, Çelenk Barfer from Istanbul Modern. And those curators gave the young curators feedback. And in this dialogue, it wasn't a long dialogue, it was maybe like 1 or 2 phone calls or emails or whatever. But the young curators got a chance to have dialogue with the artists in their community and also with these curators. The mentor curators got to see what's going on the ground, what these young people are thinking about, and what artists that they're looking at. And then the curators got to make these shows, and then the young artists got shows. So it was sort of like a win-win-win-win situation. And also these artists getting in the show got for them to be able to have other people know about their work and good things. This artist, for example, the Orange Wall is an artist named Hassan Osgur Top. And the orange is 2 shades of orange that he got from the internet that he sees a lot. One is the uniform of Guantanamo Bay uniforms, and the other one's another kind of prison uniform. And he's fading these 2 oranges together. And it's about the signification of colors that we see on the computer and on TV, on screens. And now this artist I'm going to be taking to Lima. Proto Cinema is doing a show in Lima, Peru in partnership with Proyecto Emil. And it will be his first one-person show and his first show abroad. And this is sort of like outcome from the Emerging Curator series. This is another young artist from a suburb of Damascus. And he's telling a story about his journey and sort of like how he came to become in Istanbul and the story of his family. His great-great-grandfather was an imam, was Turkish, and was sent out in the Ottoman Empire to go work. And then there was the changing of the Ottoman Empire collapsed, and there was a division of nations, and now he found his family in Syria. And so he's coming back and he's trying to get his Turkish passport. And in the research, he realized that his research could be made into an artwork. And so now this artist is also coming with us to Lima to do an artist residency. And it's sort of came out of this search for what the young people are doing. Come on, you guys must have some questions. Interrogate me. Yes? Hang on, can you wait for the microphone, please, sir?
Hi, Mary.
Hi.
I think I just wanted you to, well, when I talk about what you do to other people, the presumption is that you're this like crazy wealthy lady who just throws her money around. And I think that's awesome. That idea, yeah. But that idea of precarity that you're talking about is not just like the adventure of finding a place, but it's also your financial circumstance with the Proto Cinema. Can you talk about that a little bit so people understand that it's not a decadent precarity?
Yeah. It's a very small scale nonprofit organization. It's a nonprofit with a 501c3 registration in the United States, with a branch in Istanbul, and I do all the fundraising myself. I mean, for the Emerging Curators series, we actually did a Kiss Kiss Bank Bank crowdfunding initiative, which is modeled after Kickstarter. So we raised 8,000 euros, so each artist got 1,000 euros, which is at the time around 3,000 lira, which is a lot. But they had to go out and get it. I had to go out and ask for it. And it was super interesting to think about teaching young curators not only how to work with artists, how to install shows, how to write press releases and communicate them, but that they also have to find funding, because we all know this is a really essential part of it. So for Proto Cinema, I have a board. The board members pay to be on the board. There's one in-kind financial person. I do year-end asks, and I also do project patronage, where when I'm in the process of developing a project, I'll ask them and they can give support for the project and maybe get an edition or not get an edition. Sometimes I place work in collections. That helps. But when I do that, the artist still gets 50%, the gallery gets 10%, and 40% is fundraising for Proto Cinema. What else? Production fund. We're starting a production fund where it's sort of a similar thing as this. Also, my dad was a mailman, and I have this old blue-collar mentality that where if you want money, go out and get a job. This is another option. So like I do artwork for other organizations, like for example, Art Basel has been super supportive. I work for them, and all that money gets paid to Proto Cinema and goes back into Proto Cinema's operational costs and funding and so forth. And another thing that's been developed organically over the years is institutional partnerships. And of course, since I'm a very young organization, we're 6.5 years old, I'm partnering with other young organizations. Next year, we're doing a partnership with Kunsthalle Tbilisi, which doesn't even exist yet. They're going to open in May, but we're going to do an exhibition there. Proyecto Emil is about 3 or 4 years old in Peru. We did do a partnership with the Broad Art Museum at Michigan State University. That was a project by Ahmet Oud called Day After Debt, where it was about raising awareness of student debt in the United States. We wanted to be in a context with students, and he made and commissioned other artists to make artworks that were also collection boxes, and all the money that we collected from the collection boxes went to Rolling Jubilee, where they were buying back student loans, and so that made sense to do it with the university gallery. So for me, partnerships are saving my institution. But thank you. Yeah, it's day by day. I never know where the money is going to come from.
Can you say a little bit more about how you decided to work in this model, and what you did before that led up to this? Yeah.
I mean, I'd rather talk about Proto Cinema than me, but I've been working in galleries for 20 years, and I was the last thing I did was I was director of 303 Gallery in New York for 12 years, and before the end of that time, I started visiting Istanbul and met lots of amazing people there, artists, curators, writers, gallerists, and so forth. And then also there was, in 2008, there was a World Water Conference taking place in Turkey, so I got involved with a Turkish water activist group and was going around talking about why people should care if their water is privatized and commercialized. And so I had lots of reasons to go there, and I was just going a lot until it became sort of like, instead of a person living in New York going to Istanbul a lot, I was a person living in Istanbul going to New York, and it organically sort of shifted over. And I think working in the model had to do with, like, I had worked in galleries, and in a gallery you work with museums and stuff, and I wanted to find another way to support artists, and I always had a huge admiration for like the Public Art Fund in New York and what Tom Eccles was doing in that capacity. And I also wanted to make a job that sort of like, instead of making my life fit my job, I wanted my job to fit my life. And I wanted to travel and do things where I would learn a lot, and I didn't know what was next. So I made it up, basically. And it's going to change. And it's going to change based on like however. But eventually I think, I would love for someone else to take over Proto Cinema and, have it grow and be something that goes on and someone else directs it and puts their creativity into it and has a life of its own. Yeah.
Hello. Oh, I have a question. I'm just wondering how you feel the artworks change in meaning from being in Istanbul to the other locations. If it's like something so tangible, or if it's different in each project.
Okay. The artworks that I show in one city, for example, like Halle Tanger in New York, I would never show in Istanbul. I mean, it did get acquired by Art Terre the Koch Family Foundation, so they're going to show it hopefully someday in the future in their institution. But I don't show the same work in different cities. But I think the work does change when it travels, because the audience changes. And so, for example, like if I saw a work by an artist from China right now, and there was a signifier in it, like an image from a popular TV show, and I didn't know what it was, and I needed that translated for me, that would become part of my experience with the artwork. And so, of course, if you take something from a different context, it changes. Even like how art changes over time. We look at whatever, this Andy Warhol soup cans, and they change from when they were first made to what we think of when we see them now. Were you going to ask something?
Yes, I was wondering how safe is everyday life in Istanbul? For
Okay.
example,
Can you ask it again?
how safe is everyday life in Istanbul? For example, if I would go there and I would wish to see some of these artworks and shows that you are putting on, is it predominantly for the people who live there, or is that for international exhibits?
Right now, it's totally fine. I mean, I walk around, I go to, people go to school, go to work, they ride the metro, they go get, it's 20 million people live there. It's fine right now. I can't make any commitments on security anywhere in the world. I don't have that authority. But right now, it's totally fine. I mean, I think it's fine for different people. Like if you're a journalist or a professor or a political leader, it would be different, of course. It's very serious. But for lots of people came to the Istanbul Biennial and had a nice time and left in September. Yeah. Hi.
Okay, great. I've admired your work for such a long time, and I'm curious about the constellation of people and places. Is there a logic to Proto Cinemas' politics of empathy? How do you choose who to put where?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. In the beginning, it was New York and Istanbul because those are the places I knew. And then as time evolved, and also to be realistic, where I can afford to do shows, we're talking about the economics, that started to open up a little bit. And I say that Proto Cinema is site-aware exhibitions in the world, because ideally I want to go anywhere in the world. But then, of course, I'm getting older and I'm getting tired and I don't want to go all over the world. But for example, the exhibition in Lima is because there's a patron who's also the director of a museum who has this nonprofit, Juan Carlos Verme, who's a dear friend I've known for many years, and he's interested in what I'm doing, and he, wants to be supportive and invited me, and has the funding, and so I have to also raise some money for that too. But it's also where there's relationships, so there's that. But then, thank you for asking, because in my planning for the future, and my lack of wanting to be traveling like this because I get tired, is also I don't want to be a parachuter and just arrive somewhere that I don't know anything about the context, because that's not interesting to me and I've never done that. So of course, working that way takes time. And I'm thinking about, and I would love your feedback, about doing exhibitions of artists from anywhere, but the shows to be in Istanbul, Athens, Beirut, and Tbilisi. And these are cities that have really different kinds of contexts, and they're near each other. They have dialogue, but they don't have dialogue. They're in different regions technically, but they're kind of in a similar region. And I'm not really sure what I'm moving towards, but it's sort of out. My intuition is guiding me this way. So after Lima, maybe no more South America. But who knows?
Is this on? Yeah. Hi, Mary. It's so great you're here. Maybe this is more a comment, and maybe it relates to what you were just asking us. Because I think for me, the Trevor Paglin project in Istanbul, maybe you can touch on this more, the fact that it was in a neighborhood whereby you were there every day, often with Trevor, in a neighborhood where people have never gone to an art gallery. They have no idea this is an artwork, but then they're having an experience that I know is transformative. And it's kind of interesting because then there are other projects like Harley, which I'm sure it was more of an art-going audience. And
Yeah.
It was a very kind of a listed audience. You could probably write down all the names of the people that came through almost. So I just wonder if you could comment on that and how maybe that is related to this idea of doing projects actually in those 4 cities.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, New York has over 700 or 800 galleries and museums, and the experience of doing a art show there is great for the artists from different places who want to build relationships there and have exposures there. But for me, partly because I did it already for 20 years, partly because it's kind of against everything I believe in as far as like oversaturation, where we know that there's a misdistribution of food, there's a misdistribution of medical care, of, all different kinds of education support structures, and there's a misdistribution of culture, and I feel like it's very dense in New York, and New York doesn't really, it's a struggle to get people to come, and it's not as rewarding as doing something like when Gaetan came, we had all these kids in the neighborhood that were coming regularly, and there was one kid who thought it was hilarious to bring his friends up the stairs, and when you turn around and you see that big silver sculpture, you kind of like, what? It's very surprising. And he would bring his other little friends and scare the shit out of them, basically. And he thought it was fun. And after a while, they became regulars, and they made drawings, and we had a little art show of their drawings, and it was super rewarding. And yeah, at a different point in my life, maybe selling paintings was super exciting, and now this is super exciting. So I think it's also just about my journey and where I am too. So thank you.
This is perhaps more of a comment linking two of the previous questions, because I appreciate your comment that you'd rather speak about Proto Cinema than yourself. But then the next question was about context of how do works change depending on where they are. And so I would just offer up that Proto Cinema is your work, is your creative work, and telling us about yourself provides some context, and that enriches our understanding of your creative work. So don't ever hesitate to offer that up.
Thank you, that's awesome.
Does anybody else have any questions for Mary? So then, before we end, I'd like to remind everybody that our talks are being filmed. So in the future, you'll be able to check out all of the Power Talks on both the Power Plant's website and Art Toronto's website. So having said that, thank you once again, Mary,
Thank
for
you,
your
Tim.
amazing talk.